Chinese government.
Yes, sir.
You've been very generous with your time, and the hour is late. My name is Dan Pesh from the University of London. I wanted to ask you for comments on both verification and on confidence building. On the verification side, one of the happy things out of the whole Iraq episode was the success of UNRWA operation, and whether we should be looking rather more at the global application of the UNRWA regime as a means of addressing the verification and inspection problem. And on the confidence side, thanks in large part to the efforts of some of you on the panel, in Europe at the end of the Cold War, we've made huge progress with open skies, confidence building, and the CFE treaty, all of which are languishing somewhat. And should we not perhaps be looking at the global application of these sorts of agreements in regional context to underpin our efforts on weapons of mass destruction? Thank you.
Could I ask if we take the second question at the same time, and then people can, panel can choose which aspect they would like to answer. If we just pass the microphone across to the
verification question,
if that's okay.
Take the verification question.
John Simpson used to be in the University of Southampton until recently. We have at the moment the beginnings of a negotiation, an engagement between the P5 on nuclear disarmament through the September 2009 meeting in London and the forthcoming meeting in Paris. At the same time, we have real problems in any sort of engagement with those states which are outside the NPT, India, Pakistan, Israel, North Korea. I wonder if you can offer us some thoughts on how we come to grips, on how we, A, may move forward with the P5 discussions, and B, come to grips with the problem that we just don't seem to be able to engage the states outside the NPT in discussions on disarmament. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me comment on the verification issue. There have been remarkable advances in technology in the last decade or two, which bear very heavily, very importantly, on the verification issue. One positive aspect of that is that if we are successful in getting the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty ratified, I think the technical means of verification will be quite up to the task of verifying that treaty, where that was very much in question during the late 90s when it was rejected and passed. And that's the good news. The bad news is that the next treaty we're looking at with Russia is going to involve verifying not just missiles, but warheads themselves. This is a fundamentally much more difficult verification task. And there's no technical means I know of that will be in itself capable of doing that verification. So the verification is going to require a high degree of intrusiveness, a high degree of cooperation. And the very positive sign here is that the New START treaty has embedded in it cooperation of intrusive verification. So we're taking a very important step in that direction. I just will say that the step we're taking in New START is a very small step compared to the step we would have to take in cooperation to be able to verify a treaty that involved verifying warheads themselves.
On the second question, I'll make a brief answer. I don't have a complete answer to it because it's a challenge that doesn't have a complete answer in my view. But the question of those countries that did not part of the Nonproliferation Treaty, North Korea is a special case. Its economy, all the things George said we had to do, fiscal, education, and energy. Just think about what they've got to do to have a viable country. They don't have a viable country right now. They can't sustain themselves over the long haul with the kind of closed system they have now. The question is how you get them to discuss seriously their nuclear components, and that's a really hard road. I don't have a complete answer except we've got to be united with Japan, South Korea, and we've got to do everything we can to get the Chinese as involved as possible. The great difficulty is they're such a unstable country with their poverty and their starvation and They have huge economic problems that both our friends in South Korea as well as our friends in China are worried about their collapse. So it's limit to how much pressure neighbors are willing to put on the North Korean economic system when they are as concerned about collapse as they are about nuclear weapons. So that's the framework. We've got to be firm and patient on that one. In terms of India and Pakistan and also Israel and the Middle East, this goes back to what I was talking about the real stake the world has in bearing down on these regional problems that could cause not just conflict, but could go nuclear. And we have a real stake in working on that. It's hard right now because we've got so much else going on with Pakistan. We've got a lot of strains there, but I said the other day, and I still believe with Pakistan, we've got to be direct, we've got to be firm, we've got to do things in a quiet way. Both countries with the frustrations we have now, realizing the stakes we have and realizing the stakes they have, I think we need to take a deep breath and count to 10 because we've got a stake in working with them and they have a stake in working with us. India, we have a much better relationship with now. The nuclear deal we made with India really warmed that relationship, but to some extent it was at the expense of relationship with Pakistan, and we don't have a good approach in that respect at this time.
Your question, to a certain extent, says, how do you get the world to work better? And that's a tough thing. It has been the case, I think, as we look at the Cold War experience, that it seemed like a pretty impossible thing, but we kept at it together, and eventually it got better. And there were many periods when it was thought the Soviets would never change, and that was true in many people's eyes almost right to the end. Some of us thought otherwise. I think the British government thought otherwise. President Reagan and I thought otherwise, but not everybody in our government agreed, but we kept at it. So I think being persistent, having the right kind of a goal will pay off. Let me give you a somewhat of an example from the construction business. I used to be in that business. If you say to me as a construction guy, build me a bridge across the Potomac River, well, I do my soils test, sink my piers, and a little while later, I've got you a bridge there, you can drive the truck over it, problem solved, done with that. If you say to me, build the bridge in such a way that there are no lost time accidents while the bridge is being built, and I put up guardrails and so on, and I think I've solved the problem, done with that, I've lost. It's not that kind of a problem. But if I work at it creatively, professionally, ruthlessly, I just might get that bridge built without a lost time accident. And I think in many ways the business of how you get the world to work better is like that. It's not a soluble problem in the sense that you're going to finally put in place A, B, C, and D, done with that, walk away. It's something that we have to work at. We have to have ideas, we have to have strength, and we have to have strength of purpose. We have to have allies who work along together. We have to engage the people who are difficult in some way or another. Sometimes the best way to engage them is not to talk to them, and they feel it. People say we didn't engage with Iran in the Reagan administration. Actually, we did quietly, but when they were messing around with Kuwaiti shipping, we reflagged the ships to our flag. And when the president of Iran was in the United Nations making a speech saying the last thing Iran would do would put a mine in the Persian Gulf, our Navy was taking a picture of them doing it. And then we boarded the ship and took some mines off for evidence, took the sailors off, sank the ship, took the sailors to Dubai and said to Iran, come and get your sailors and cut it out. So it was very clear communications. Sometimes you have to do that. But I think the key is to have some goals of what makes sense and to keep working at them. And I think getting rid of nuclear weapons makes sense for everybody because the consequences of their use are so catastrophic. And if it's possible to make progress on that goal, a lot of other things will fall into place along with it. And I think the chances are, in some ways, that a real galvanizing of people to get behind this effort could wind up doing a lot of other kinds of things, consequentially making the world better. So
thank you very much.
My message is never give up. Keep working on it.
Before I hand back to